Permission has been granted. That is the sentence that changed the direction of the search for Lynette Hooker. For nearly 2 months, the question had been carried by water, wind, family members, investigators, and strangers following the case from thousands of miles away. Where was Lynette? Where did she go into the water? And was the story of that night complete? Now, authorities in the Bahamas have granted the United States Coast Guard Investigative Service permission to send divers into previously unsearched areas of the Sea of Abaco. Not because of a rumor, not because of internet speculation, not because someone online had a theory, because forensic evidence recovered from electronic devices connected to Brian Hooker reportedly led investigators to locations they had not searched before. And according to public reporting, that GPS data did not align with what Brian Hooker told investigators about where he was, where the couple traveled, and where authorities should look. That is the turning point. A missing woman, a husband who says she fell overboard, a small dinghy in the Bahamas, a yacht named Soulmate, a search that began as a rescue and became a criminal investigation. And now, a new search area defined not by memory, not by statements, but by digital location data. Before we go further, this must be said clearly. Brian Hooker has not been charged with a crime in connection with Lynette Hooker's disappearance. He has denied wrongdoing. His attorney has said he categorically and unequivocally denies any wrongdoing, and authorities have not publicly accused him in court of causing Lynette's disappearance. This story is not a verdict. It is a documented timeline of what has been reported, what investigators have done, and why the case has taken such a serious turn. If you follow true crime stories where the smallest details matter, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to Time in Crime. It helps us continue covering cases carefully, factually, and with respect for the people at the center of them. Lynette Hooker was 55 years old from Michigan, and by the time her name entered national headlines, she and her husband Brian had already spent years presenting a life built around sailing, travel, and water. They were not just occasional boaters. Public reporting describes Lynette as a sailor, a mother, and a woman whose life had become deeply connected to the sea. She and Brian had documented their travels online, sharing videos and posts from their sailing life aboard a vessel called Soulmate. The name alone would become impossible to ignore. Soulmate, a boat name that suggested partnership, escape, reinvention, and a life chosen together. In videos and posts, the couple appeared to be doing what many people only imagine. They had left behind a more ordinary routine and moved into a world of open water, island passages, boat repairs, bright horizons, and long-distance cruising. Their story was not hidden. It was public enough that, after Lynette vanished, strangers began looking back through pieces of their online life, searching for context, searching for clues, searching for anything that might explain how a woman with experience around boats could disappear during what was supposed to be a short trip across the water. But the public image of a life can only show what the camera catches. And on the night of April 4th, 2026, the part of the story that mattered most happened away from the camera, in the dark, between Hopetown, Elbow Cay, Aunt Pat's Bay, and the open water of the Abacos. According to authorities and public reporting, Brian Hooker told police that he and Lynette had left Hopetown in an 8-foot motorboat or dinghy on the evening of April 4th. They were headed back toward their yacht, Soulmate, in the area of Elbow Cay. Brian's account was that bad weather or rough conditions caused Lynette to fall from the dinghy. He told authorities that she went overboard with the boat keys or key equipment, causing the motor to shut off. According to the account released in early reporting, strong currents carried her away, and Brian lost sight of her. He then said he paddled or made his way to shore and alerted someone early the next morning. That was the first version of the story known to the public. A tragic accident in unpredictable seas, a wife overboard, a disabled dinghy, a husband unable to restart the motor, a night spent trying to reach help, and a woman gone before anyone could find her. At first, the case had the shape of a maritime emergency, a person in the water, a search by land, sea, and air, a desperate family waiting for news. Local responders, Bahamian authorities, and the United States Coast Guard became involved as the search for Lynette began. But almost from the beginning, there were questions. Some of those questions came from Lynette's family. Her daughter, Carly Aylesworth, publicly questioned aspects of Brian's account. In interviews, she said she did not understand how her mother would have ended up with the key if Brian was usually the one driving. She also described her mother as experienced on the water and expressed doubt about the sequence of events Brian described. Those statements are not evidence by themselves. They are the perspective of a daughter trying to make sense of her mother's disappearance. But in a case where only one person returned from the water, every detail in the surviving account mattered. The timing mattered. The distance mattered. The keys mattered. The route mattered. And above all, the location mattered. Because when a person disappears in the sea, the search area is everything. If the starting point is wrong, the drift calculations may be wrong. If the route is wrong, the search grids may be wrong. If the account of where someone went overboard is incomplete, then crews may spend critical hours searching places where the missing person never was. That is why the new GPS development is so important. But before the GPS data became public, the case had already entered a more serious phase. On April 8th, several days after Lynette disappeared, Brian Hooker was taken into custody by Bahamian authorities for questioning. Reports described him as being questioned in connection with the disappearance. The United States Coast Guard also opened a criminal investigation. That word changed the tone of the case. Criminal investigation. It did not mean Brian had been charged. It did not mean investigators had reached a conclusion. It did not mean the public knew what happened. But it did mean authorities were looking at the disappearance through more than one lens. Not only as a boating accident, not only as a missing person at sea, but as a case where evidence needed to be preserved, statements needed to be tested, devices needed to be examined, and the physical vessel connected to the disappearance could become central to the investigation. Brian's attorney pushed back strongly against suspicion. She said he denied wrongdoing and was cooperating with authorities. Brian was later released without charges on April 13th after prosecutors did not recommend charges at that time, while the investigation continued. That distinction matters. Released without charges does not mean cleared forever. It also does not mean guilty. It means that at that moment, authorities did not file a criminal case against him. After his release, Brian spoke publicly about Lynette. He told reporters that his sole focus was finding his wife. He said he loved Lynette and wanted the truth to come out. He became emotional when describing the situation and said he would always wonder if there was something he could have done differently. Those statements are part of the record too. In responsible coverage, they have to remain in the story, because this is not a case where the narrator gets to decide guilt from a distance. The facts have to carry the weight, and the facts show that even after Brian was released, investigators did not stop. They kept looking. They kept processing evidence. They kept searching for people who might have seen something in Aunt Pat's Bay on April 4th. In early May, the Coast Guard Investigative Service asked for the public's help identifying a sailboat that may have been moored near Soulmate on the night Lynette disappeared. Investigators said the owner or occupants of that vessel could have information important to the case. That request revealed something significant about the direction of the investigation. Authorities were not only relying on Brian's account, they were trying to locate independent witnesses. A nearby boat can matter in ways that are not obvious at first. Someone aboard may have heard voices. They may have seen lights. They may have noticed a dinghy moving through the anchorage. They may have taken a photo without realizing what was in the background. They may have security footage, navigation logs, or simply a memory of where Soulmate was and what activity took place around it. In a marina, harbor, or anchorage, the water is not always as empty as it looks. Other vessels become silent neighbors. And sometimes, silent neighbors become witnesses. Then came another major development. The Coast Guard Investigative Service seized Soulmate. According to the United States Coast Guard, special agents with CGIS, supported by Coast Guard surface and aviation assets, seized the sailing vessel approximately 40 nautical miles off the coast of Melbourne, Florida. The Coast Guard described the seizure as part of an ongoing criminal investigation into Lynette Hooker's disappearance. The vessel was taken into CGIS custody. Again, that did not mean charges had been filed, but it did mean the boat itself was now evidence. Soulmate was no longer only the couple's home, their dream, their social media backdrop, or the destination Brian said they were trying to reach on the night Lynette vanished. It had become an object investigators wanted to control, preserve, and examine. A boat can hold more information than people realize, not just fingerprints or visible damage. Modern vessels can contain electronics, cameras, navigation equipment, digital recorders, tablets, phones, communication systems, and data trails that remain long after a human memory becomes uncertain or incomplete. Public reporting said investigators had already obtained items including a digital video recorder, tablets, and cell phone-related equipment through a search warrant. Later reporting also indicated that investigators were examining whether technology aboard Soulmate, including an infrared camera, might hold evidence relevant to the night Lynette disappeared. That phrasing is important. Investigators were examining whether it might hold evidence. Not that the camera proved anything. Not that the camera captured anything. Not that anyone used it that night. Only that technology aboard the vessel had become one more possible source of information. In a case like this, the smallest digital record can matter. A timestamp, a route, a device connection, a camera file, a deleted item recovered later, a location point saved automatically, a gap in data, a file that was never meant to become part of an investigation. The sea can erase footprints. Digital systems often do not. And that is where this case moved next. By late May, the most significant development yet became public. Federal investigators had obtained GPS data from at least one of Brian Hooker's electronic devices. According to officials cited in public reporting, that data appeared to contradict his account of where he was on the night Lynette disappeared. One report described the data as showing a track of the device's movements that did not align with what Brian told investigators. The newly obtained data reportedly showed the device out on the water, stopping in the Sea of Abaco and returning. Stopping. That word is why the story shifted. Adrift is uncontrolled. A current carries. A disabled boat is at the mercy of water and wind. But investigators were reportedly looking at data that gave them a more precise area to search. Not just a broad current line. Not just a general region. A location that had not previously been searched. That does not prove what happened to Lynette. It does not prove a crime. It does not prove intent. But it gives investigators something concrete. Coordinates. And in a missing person case on the water, coordinates can become the difference between searching a vast sea and sending divers to a defined area. That is why the permission from Bahamian authorities matters so much. Because the search area is in Bahamian territorial waters, United States investigators cannot simply send divers wherever they want. They needed permission. And public reporting now says that permission was granted. So the investigation entered a new stage. Divers could go into the Sea of Abaco. The new search would focus on previously unsearched areas. And those areas were identified because electronic data reportedly did not match the account Brian had given. For weeks, people following the case had wondered if the ocean had swallowed the truth. But this development suggested something different. The water may have hidden Lynette, but the devices may have remembered the route. The first public version of the night was built around an accident. Rough weather, a fall, keys lost overboard, an engine that could not restart, and a long struggle to reach shore. The new investigative turn is built around data, device movement, GPS records, a stop in the Sea of Abaco, and a return. Those two versions now sit side by side. One from the only person known to have been with Lynette when she disappeared. One from electronic records investigators say they recovered. And that is the heart of part one. Not an accusation, a collision. A human account and a digital trail. The official search for Lynette began as a race against time. In the early hours after someone goes into the water, search crews think in terms of survival windows, currents, tides, wind, visibility, and last known position. Every hour matters. Every reported detail matters. But as days passed without finding Lynette, the case became heavier. The search and rescue effort became a recovery effort. The family's hope became mixed with fear. And investigators began treating the case as something that required forensic answers. Brian Hooker remained the only person known to have been with Lynette on the dinghy that night. That does not make him guilty. But it does make his account central. In any disappearance where one person vanishes and another survives, the surviving witness's timeline becomes the foundation investigators must test. They test it against weather. They test it against distance. They test it against physical evidence. They test it against phone records. They test it against search patterns. And when they can, they test it against GPS. Because GPS does not tell the whole story, but it can answer one powerful question. Where was the device? That question now appears to be driving the next search. The Sea of Abaco is not an abstract location. It is a real body of water surrounded by islands, anchorages, routes, and passages that locals and sailors know well. To the outside world, the Bahamas often looks like paradise. Clear water, white sand, bright sun, boats resting in blue anchorages. But at night, on the water, beauty can become distance. A shoreline can look closer than it is. A small dinghy can feel fragile. A person in the water can vanish in seconds. And when no body is recovered, the missing person remains suspended between every possible explanation. Accident, miscommunication, panic, delay, foul play, unknown circumstances. Investigators do not get to choose the simplest answer. They have to follow evidence. And right now, according to public reporting, the evidence has led them back into the water. The fact that divers are being sent matters because it suggests investigators have narrowed their focus. Aerial searches and surface searches can cover wide areas, but divers are different. Divers are specific. Divers go down when there is something to inspect below the surface. They search where planes cannot see clearly, where waves distort the bottom, where depth and debris and time can hide evidence. Reporting has described the new area as reaching depths of about 25 feet. That is not deep by ocean standards, but it is deep enough that something on the bottom may not be obvious from above. It is also shallow enough for a targeted dive search to be meaningful if investigators believe they have reliable coordinates. That is why the GPS data is not just another detail. It is the bridge between the original story and the new search. Investigators are no longer only asking where Lynette might have drifted. They are asking where the device went. They are asking why the device's movement reportedly does not align with Brian's statements. They are asking what might be found where that movement stopped. And they are asking whether the evidence below the surface can explain what happened above it. The timeline is stark. On April 4th, Lynette Hooker disappears during a nighttime dinghy ride in the Bahamas. On April 5th, she is reported missing. On April 8th, Brian Hooker is taken into custody for questioning. On April 13th, he is released without charges. In early May, investigators seek help identifying a nearby sailboat that may have been moored close to Soulmate. On May 14th, the United States Coast Guard confirms that CGIS seized Soulmate off the coast of Florida as part of an ongoing criminal investigation. By late May, reports say GPS data from Brian Hooker's electronic devices has led investigators to new areas of interest. Then comes the sentence that opened this story. Permission granted. Divers going in. It is a short phrase, but it carries the weight of everything that came before it. The vanished woman. The grieving family. The husband's account. The unanswered questions. The seized vessel. The electronic devices. The forensic processing. The search for witnesses. The GPS track. The Sea of Abaco. And beneath all of it, the same question that has followed this case from the beginning. What happened to Lynette Hooker? The safest answer, and the only responsible answer right now, is that we do not know. We know what Brian Hooker reported. We know he has denied wrongdoing. We know he has not been charged. We know authorities have treated the disappearance seriously enough to open a criminal investigation, seize Soulmate, process electronic evidence, and seek a targeted dive search. We know investigators reportedly found GPS data that does not align with his account. And we know that because of that data, divers are now expected to search places that were not searched before. Not with a conclusion, with a descent. Because somewhere in the Sea of Abaco, investigators believe there may be evidence that matters. Maybe the dive team finds nothing. Maybe the water gives up an object. Maybe the data leads to a location that clarifies the timeline. Maybe it deepens the mystery. But from this point forward, the case is no longer only about what someone said happened in the dark. It is also about what the devices recorded. And in the disappearance of Lynette Hooker, that may be the most important witness investigators have left. If you want where we continue following the dive search, the evidence from Soulmate, and the unanswered questions surrounding the timeline, make sure to like this video and subscribe to Time in Crime. Investigators were no longer just asking where the current might have taken Lynette Hooker. They were asking where the data said someone went. That is what changed everything. Because when the United States Coast Guard Investigative Service received permission from Bahamian authorities to send divers into previously unsearched areas of the Sea of Abaco, it meant the search had narrowed. It meant investigators believed electronic evidence had pointed them toward a place that mattered. Not a coastline, not a theory, a location. And in a case where one woman vanished at sea and the only known person with her that night returned without her, location is everything. Before we continue, remember this clearly. Brian Hooker has not been charged with a crime in connection with Lynette Hooker's disappearance. He has denied wrongdoing. His attorneys have maintained his innocence. This script does not treat suspicion as proof, and it does not present allegations as conclusions. It follows the documented record. If you want careful true crime coverage that keeps the victim at the center while respecting the facts, take a second to like this video and subscribe to Time in Crime. It helps us keep following cases responsibly as they develop. Not the dinghy, not the ocean. The larger vessel Lynette and Brian called home. Soulmate. The same boat that had once symbolized freedom, retirement, and a life built around sailing became federal evidence in an active criminal investigation. The Coast Guard confirmed that CGIS agents seized Soulmate approximately 40 nautical miles off the coast of Melbourne, Florida, as part of the ongoing investigation into Lynette's disappearance. That seizure matters because a vessel can hold more than memories. It can hold devices. It can hold logs. It can hold camera systems. It can hold records of what happened when no human witness is available to explain it. And one of the most important pieces of reported technology aboard Soulmate was an infrared camera made by FLIR. Public reporting says the camera was capable of detecting heat radiation. That kind of system can be useful for nighttime navigation, avoiding collisions, and detecting a person in the water. CBS reported that the camera could operate with a cloud memory system, which means investigators are not only interested in the physical device, they are also interested in whether the system stored anything beyond the boat itself. That is important. But the responsible wording matters just as much. It is not publicly known whether Brian Hooker used that camera on the night Lynette disappeared. CBS reported that the camera is being processed as part of the ongoing probe, but it did not report that the camera captured Lynette, captured Brian, or proved what happened. The camera is not a verdict. It is a question. If it was active, what did it record? If it was not active, why not? If it stored data in the cloud, can investigators recover it? And if it shows nothing, does that absence help confirm or challenge the timeline? That is how modern investigations work. Sometimes the evidence is what a device captured. Sometimes the evidence is when a device stopped capturing. Sometimes the most important part of a system is not the image, but the timestamp. Soulmate also had another digital trail attached to it, AIS. AIS stands for Automatic Identification System. It is used by vessels to broadcast information such as identity, position, speed, and course. It is not designed as a true crime tool. It is a maritime safety system. But in this case, it became part of the public discussion because Fox News reported that vessel finder tracking data showed Soulmate's AIS stopped transmitting at 9:29 p.m. on April 4th and did not resume until 8:40 a.m. on April 5th. That is a gap of more than 11 hours. No public charging document explains why that gap happened. No official statement has said the system was deliberately turned off. AIS interruptions can be caused by several things, including equipment issues, signal problems, power interruptions, or manual action. But because the timing overlaps the night Lynette disappeared, investigators will naturally want to understand it. Why did the signal stop? What systems on the boat were active during that window? What devices were connected? What was happening around Soulmate while Brian says he was away from the vessel, drifting or paddling toward shore? Again, the AIS gap does not prove a crime. But it adds one more digital question to a case already shaped by data. And then there is the other boat. In early May, CGIS asked for the public's help identifying the owner or occupants of a sailboat that may have been moored near Soulmate in Aunt Pat's Bay on the night Lynette disappeared. That appeal is one of the most important documented developments in the case, because it tells us investigators were looking for independent information. They were not only reviewing Brian's account. They were not only reviewing electronic devices. They were looking for people who may have been close enough to see or hear something in the anchorage on April 4th. The Coast Guard memo reported by CBS said the owner or occupants of that sailboat may have information relevant to the CGIS investigation. That does not mean the people on that boat did anything wrong. It does not even mean they knew anything had happened. They may have been asleep. They may have seen nothing. They may have left before the critical window. Or they may have noticed something that seemed ordinary at the time, but became significant later. A light, a sound, a dinghy moving through the anchorage, a voice across the water, a vessel nearby changing position, a photograph taken without realizing another boat was in the background. On the water, witnesses do not always understand they are witnesses until days or weeks later. That is why CGIS wanted to identify them, not for speculation, for corroboration. Because in a case like this, an independent witness can help anchor the timeline. They can confirm whether Soulmate was quiet. They can confirm whether there was activity nearby. They can help investigators compare what was seen in the anchorage against what was reported afterward. The public transcript you provided names a specific yacht, but I am not going to use that name here unless it is clearly confirmed in credible public reporting. The documented point is strong enough without it. Investigators are looking for a sailboat that may have been near Soulmate, and they believe its owner or occupants may have relevant information. That alone matters. Then there is the personal history. This is the part of the story that has to be handled carefully. Public reporting says Lynette's daughter, Carly Aylesworth, questioned Brian Hooker's account from the beginning. She described her mother as experienced on the water and said the story did not make sense to her. She also alleged that her mother had previously confided troubling information about the marriage. Those are family allegations, not court findings. They should never be treated as proof of what happened on April 4th. But they are part of why Lynette's family demanded a deeper investigation. There is also a documented 2015 police report from Kentwood, Michigan. According to reporting, that report described Brian and Lynette accusing each other of assault during a domestic incident. Lynette was arrested and spent a night in jail, but prosecutors later declined to pursue charges because there was insufficient evidence to determine who started the altercation. That history does not prove what happened in the Bahamas. It does not establish guilt. It does not replace forensic evidence. But it does provide context for why investigators and family members would examine the relationship, the timeline, and the statements with care. Brian Hooker's attorney has denied wrongdoing on his behalf. That must remain part of the story every time this history is discussed. Because the question is not whether the internet can convict someone. The question is whether investigators can establish facts. And now the facts being tested are increasingly digital. CBS reported that newly obtained GPS data from one of Brian Hooker's electronic devices showed a track that did not align with what he told investigators. According to that reporting, the device was out on the water, stopped in the Sea of Abaco, and then returned. That is the detail that led to the renewed search. Fox News reported that data from Brian Hooker's phone, specifically GPS data from a marine navigation app used while the couple was on the dinghy, prompted investigators to focus on a new area of Bahamian waters reaching about 25 feet deep. CBS also reported that investigators asked Lynette's family members to provide DNA samples to assist the investigation, and that additional evidence from the case was being processed by the FBI in Quantico. Those details show preparation. A dive team does not go into the water simply because people online have questions. DNA is not requested casually. Evidence is not sent for forensic processing because a story is popular. These are investigative steps. They mean authorities are preparing for the possibility that something may be recovered. Maybe nothing will be found. Maybe the search area will produce no answers. But if divers recover remains, clothing, personal items, equipment, or anything connected to Lynette, investigators need a process ready to identify it, preserve it, and understand where it fits in the larger timeline. That is why the case feels different now. At the beginning, the search depended heavily on Brian's reported account. A dinghy ride, rough conditions, Lynette going overboard with the keys, the engine shutting off, and Brian making his way to shore hours later. Now the investigation includes more than that account. It includes GPS data. It includes the seized vessel. It includes the FLIR camera being processed. It includes AIS tracking questions. It includes the search for a nearby sailboat's owner or occupants. It includes DNA collection from family members. It includes evidence being processed at the FBI laboratory. And it includes divers preparing to search a targeted area in the Sea of Abaco. This is the point where the story becomes less about what the ocean may have taken and more about what technology may have kept. A device does not explain emotion. It does not tell investigators what someone was thinking. It does not reveal intent by itself. But it can place a phone, a vessel, or a person-linked device in a specific area at a specific time. It can show movement. It can show a stop. It can show a return. It can show whether a timeline is consistent or whether it needs to be questioned. That is why the phrase previously unsearched areas is so important. For weeks, searchers looked for Lynette based on the information available to them. But if the newly recovered data points somewhere else, then the original search may not have covered the most important location. That is the heartbreak of water searches. The sea is huge. Time is limited. Every assumption matters. If the last known position is wrong, the entire search can shift away from where it needs to be. And that is why the divers matter. Divers represent focus. Divers represent coordinates. Divers represent investigators saying, "We have reason to look here. Not everywhere. Here." Through all of this, Lynette Hooker must remain more than the center of a mystery. She was a mother, a sailor, a woman from Michigan who spent years near water, boats, and travel. She had a family fighting for answers. She had a life before the headlines, before the GPS data, before soulmate became evidence, before strangers began studying maps of the Abacos. Her disappearance is not entertainment to the people who love her. It is absence. It is unanswered calls. It is a daughter questioning the last story she was given. It is a mother waiting for news no parent should have to receive. And it is an investigation moving carefully through the space between allegation and evidence. Brian Hooker remains uncharged. He denies wrongdoing. Authorities have not publicly concluded what happened to Lynette, but the documented facts show this case has moved into a serious forensic phase. The boat has been seized. A camera is being processed. Electronic location data has changed the search. A nearby sailboat's occupants are being sought. Family DNA has been requested. The FBI is processing evidence, and divers have been cleared to enter the Sea of Abaco. So part 2 does not end with an answer. It ends with a question moving underwater. What is at the location the data pointed to? If you have credible information about Lynette Hooker's disappearance the night of April 4th, or the sailboat CGIS has asked the public to help identify, submit it through the official Coast Guard Investigative Service tip process. And if you want us to continue following the verified developments in this case, like this video and subscribe to Time in Crime. We will keep covering Lynette's story carefully, factually, and with the reminder that every update should bring us closer to the truth, not farther from it.